feel the last thing I want to do is to get up in the morning and go anywhere and get in a bus or on a boat or fly anywhere. I just want to sit around. I'm quite lazy, I think. But travelling kind of energizes me, keeps the brain ticking over, keeps the body sort of tested. And I think my family is sort of aware now that it's better to have a husband or father who's fulfilled rather than frustrated. And as I do enjoy the journeys, I think they accept that I'm away for a certain period of time. That's what I do. When I come back, I'm I'm usually actually flaked out for a long time, but I'm much happier than if I had to do something else in which my heart wasn't really in. So on balance, the family are really good about it. I find that having done the journey, I then very often have quite a long period at home, either writing the book or the commentary for the series. So in a sense, I probably over a long period spend more time at home than most people who would go to work, certainly on a 9-to-5 job. So it kind of balances out. But I am restless, but I also do enjoy the sheer pleasure of sitting at a table, staring into the middle distance with a glass of beer or something and not having to think about anything. When I started Around the World in 80 Days, I took lots of phrase books with me and tried to make sure that I had a few phrases for each country, and just make it much easier. Then I found it quite difficult because I got the sort of phrases slightly muddled up, and we'd been in Greece for 2 days, and then suddenly we're in Egypt. You have to have another one, and then you're in sort of Dubai or something like that, and then you're in India. And what I do now is I try to just have a phrase for good morning, hello, I'm English, sorry, which all you really need to say, rather than attempt to really learn the language or give a sort of full frontal assault on the language, because that's really quite tricky and you can get very easily tripped up. But I do think it's quite important just to be able to say hello, good morning, thank you is a good one, and if possible something like you live in a very beautiful country, something disarming like that. But I don't usually get as far as that. So everyone else so little. Well, it is comedy, Anyway, I've got to walk on the boat. See you later. For the programs we're making, to have a lot of a foreign language means subtitles and it means translation. I think that puts a barrier between myself, the person I'm interviewing, and the viewer. So that's why we tend to interview people who have a certain amount of English, or interview people who I can understand a certain amount of, so that I can then translate it myself. But we try to avoid long subtitles. It's just easier. The full circle, I think, was gastronomically the most challenging of all the journeys. We did have some very strange things to eat. As maggots in Mexico City, and this very, very strong, smelly fruit called durian, which is I think it's a delicacy in Java, I think. Anyway, it smells absolutely foul, and apparently they don't allow it on airlines for that reason, because one bite of durian and the whole plane is it stinks for weeks. So I had to experiment eating that, and actually it's fine once you eat it. It's a bit like, I suppose, the Chinese and certainly the Japanese, whose standards of food are absolutely so high that you rarely have anything bad to eat there. But something like cheese they don't know about at all. So I suppose to them a sort of slab of Stilton would be what durian is to us, something absolutely foul. But actually, once you eat it, it's okay. All right, soft like banana. Well, this is a first. You can see durian tasting off. You're going to have some as well. I'll have some if you have some, Echo. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Yummy.
Oh, God. Oh, that was a very strange taste. Yeah.
I think probably the most unlikely thing I ever took was a drink in Peru, in a village on the Urubamba River, and we never really quite captured it on film. I mean, we filmed there, but almost as soon as we landed, everything was very unfamiliar. This is a small Mashagenga Indian village, and almost as soon as we landed, this old lady came up with a gourd full of a pink liquid, looked like a sort of yogurt, and handed it out to me and said, "Oh, please," So someone offers you something like that, it's highly rude to turn it down. So I said, "Oh, thank you very much." Took a little bit, took it back, and she looked at me very, very great gratitude and pleasure. And then I asked what it was, and someone said, "Well, they make this as a special palm wine. It's quite strong, and they make it for a festival of St. John, and very often they cut down almost the entire sugar crop around a village to ferment this. It's so important to make this strong drink." So I was smiling, and the old lady was kind of looking at me again, and then the guide added, "But in places where there isn't any sugar growing, it's fermented by the saliva from the old ladies of the village." So they spit into it. So there was a bit of a pause, and then I realised why she was smiling at me so much. So I said to the guy, "So is there much sugar grown around this area?" And, bit of a pause. "No."
Well, here's I'm game for anything. You know, Nigel? It's lovely, isn't it?
I don't think I'd have drunk it if someone said, "Here's some palm wine with saliva." I sort of aftertaste of saliva, try it. I don't think I would, but I did, and that's part of the enjoyment of these journeys, that you have to sometimes forget about your inhibitions and throw caution to the winds, and the rewards sometimes are quite extraordinary. Mayumi Nobetsu was one of the earliest fans I ever had, not just for the travel shows, right back to Python, I think. And just wonderful to get this Japanese girl sending these beautiful letters, little sort of drawings of the Knights of the Holy Grail and all that. And so when we were going to Tokyo, the director Clem Valance said, "It's a big city, how on earth are we going to deal with this? Where do we go? We don't know anybody there." And I said, I could call Mayumi, and I called her, and of course, as you will see, she is absolutely superb. Without Mayumi there, Tokyo just wouldn't have worked. And very bright, lively, funny, and we got on very well. It wasn't awkward. It might be due to fan and the person she idolised, I suppose. Though I have to say that since we've done the programme, I haven't heard from her at all. So I don't know. Maybe I was a terrible disappointment to her. But anyway, if you do see this Mayumi, write me a letter. Tell me if you enjoyed it or not. The psychic surgery in the Philippines was one of the more bizarre things I've ever been involved in filming, and it basically there are these healers in a certain part of the Philippines, traditional healers, so presumably whatever techniques or skills they have been handed down over generations. So they're highly regarded, and people do believe that they can actually take out bits of your body without cutting the skin in any way. And this is what we witnessed. And we went along and saw, they were very happy for us to film fairly close. These hands working on someone's skin, and a bit of blood appears to come through the skin. He appears to take some small organism out, nothing very big, but like a sort of bit of tissue or something like that, and that's then thrown away. And I have to say, the first man we went to, I really didn't believe it. There was something about him which seemed, I don't know, almost too unlikely he could do this. The second man we went to was less of a showman, much quieter, more reserved, very, very soft-spoken and intelligent, and he believed this, and he showed us again what he could do, and the people get up and they feel better and off they go. I happen to think balance, it's probably a hoax, because I can't see how you can take out some part of someone's body without there being, an incision on the skin. You can't just do it with your hands. And I have to say that we never saw any identifiable body part removed. On the other hand, people must feel better after it. People must, in some cases, be completely healed. Otherwise, these people wouldn't be in business. It wouldn't still happen. And I think this is something which we don't understand very much about. And in our Western ways, we do believe there has to be a rational and scientific explanation for everything. And when you travel around the world, you find in a lot of communities there just isn't that explanation. It's all to do with faith and belief. One of the things that I suppose you could say made this journey different from the others, or one of them, many things, but a particular difference was that on this one there was an emergency for me to deal with at home. I mean, I tend to just go and I ring Helen, I ring home whenever I can, and generally it's me talking on about, I've seen a volcano, or I've been, whitewater rafting or something like that, and my wife has sort of had to deal with the plumber, or the fridge has broken down or something like that, so she'll be talking about something fairly basic. But we were in Kuching in Sarawak after about 4 days filming headhunters upriver. They're not headhunters now, but they were Iban people who were headhunters before. And we got back to Kuching, got back to the hotel, and I was given a message as I checked in, and I remember at the time we were sort of dirty, sweaty, we'd been, living fairly rough for 3 or 4 days. We just all wanted a bath and crash out. And there was a message from Helen, which it's rare that she rings me. Usually because it's much easier for me to ring her. She doesn't know where I am. Not that she doesn't want to ring me, I'm sure, but in this case, a message from Helen, and also there was a message for our assistant cameraman, Stephen Robinson. And so anyway, we all sort of disappeared, and I threw my gear down on the floor, picked up the phone, and Helen told me that she'd been diagnosed with a brain tumour, a benign brain tumour. Kept saying the word benign. And we'd never had to deal with anything like that before in the family, and I'd never had to deal with it at such a distance, and I suddenly felt completely helpless. And we talked. Unfortunately, she had family, sisters, my children were at home, everything was okay. She'd been to the hospital. The surgeon planned to operate within 2 or 3 days. He had given instructions for me to ring him at any time, day or night, and he would tell me exactly what he was going to do, and that there was the tiniest risk, but basically it was straightforward brain surgery. But still, the words brain surgery and tumour and all that frightened me a lot, and I was quite stunned by that. And I went downstairs, and Stephen's call had been because his daughter, who was only a few months old, had fallen from a first floor window, and she, turns out in the end, hadn't been too badly hurt, but she'd been quite, knocked about. So these two sort of double blows had happened out of the blue like that, and you feel completely shaken, because your natural instinct is to want to be with your wife or your daughter or whatever, and yet obviously to get home would have been probably 2 days travelling. What helped me was partly because Helen just said, look, don't rush back, you'll get in a terrible sort of panic, I'd rather you waited and be well looked after, etc., etc. Come back when it's over and I've had the operation. And the surgeon who operated on Helen was absolutely brilliant, and I rang him up, as he'd said, and I rang him up 2 or 3 times, usually from completely remote places. And one time we're in a place called Yogyakarta in Java, and I said, I rang him up and he said what was going to happen. He said it's absolutely fine. He talked about it. He said the operation will be, sort of tomorrow. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I've got to go now because we're filming a gamelan orchestra. And I went on and say it's a special kind of music involving bells. He said, gamelan? And I said, yes. He said, I'm one of the few people in England who's part of a gamelan orchestra. And by extraordinary coincidence, the surgeon actually played in a gamelan orchestra somewhere in Potter's Bar or somewhere like that. So that's what made me feel closer to him. And in the end, both the operations were absolutely fine. Helen came through it, and Stephen and I went back when we finished the filming in Java. We went back home for about 4 days and then flew back out to carry on filming in Australia. Unfortunately, as soon as I got back home, as often happens, I sort of contracted some cold, probably from the aircraft, something like that. Anyway, got back home, and Helen was virtually nursing me for 4 days, like sort of looking after her, and she'd had this tumour removed, and I'm coughing and spluttering and sneezing all over the place, and she's never forgotten that. She'd probably just as well have stayed there. The Pacific Rim, like anywhere else really we've filmed in the world, does have this contrast between very rich people and poor people, big cities and tiny villages. Now I always find that usually the poorer people are the people who are much more hospitable and welcoming and more willing to share with you. The richer the people you encounter, the more guarded they are, the more careful they are, the more they're like to ask you where this is going to go out and will they be shown up as this, that and the other. And I remember very much in the Philippines, it was a small Muslim village on stilts above the water in Zamboanga, and they had the tin mosque painted, and children going off to school with their bags over their shoulders and all that. And they were living in houses really that had no sort of sanitary, very basic sort of hygiene, very basic sort of in terms of electrical supply. It's just a dim lamp, and most of it was just candles and all that. So they didn't have much, but they had a great strength there. And some of the older villages, like in China, that had been unchanged for many years, put them beside the big cities in China, and these places had no money at all, yet there were very strong communities. They learnt to live together and help each other out, and that very, very often happens with the poorest people. I suppose in certain areas, I don't know why, in Colombia and in South America, for instance, I found the poverty there really hard to deal with, because there was no really comeback from people. These were people, in one case, literally at the bottom of the pile. We were filming an emerald mine, and the emerald mine, for a start, was run by people with guns. It was a kind of place for sort of thugs and bullies, I think, really. All right, they were, producing these emeralds, and at the very end, where the stream with the emeralds ran out into the river, there was a fence, and the poorest people were allowed up to this fence to see if they could find any residue of emeralds. And I can just remember seeing people scrabbling in the dirt there, trying to extract something that would be worth selling, something that might make them rich as the people up above. And the contrast there between the rich and the poor was so strong. You knew that if you just had one small emerald, it would make you richer than these people could ever be in their own lifetime. And these people, somehow the continuity of their lives had been kind of ruptured, and they were just there with no hope. It's almost the communities had broken down. And similarly in Bogota, with the quite serious problem of drug addiction there were people there, who were poor and desperate at the same time. But I think there's a danger of, using words like the poor or poverty, and you just forget it covers not only over half the world is probably beneath what we'd call the poverty line. So the exception is wealth, not poverty. And it covers many, many different people. And many of the finest and some most inspiring people I've ever met have been very, very poor and managing to bring up their families and survive. I was really pleased to get to Bogota. I know it has a reputation, but we'd been in the jungle and on the Amazon for about a couple of weeks. We hadn't had a decent bath, cold beer for a long, long time. And suddenly we flew from Leticia, which is right on the Amazon, heart of the jungle. We flew to Bogota, and Bogota suddenly found ourselves in this wonderful hotel. And in many ways, Bogota is a very, very civilized, modern city with a strong sort of middle class, and they've got bookshops and sort of coffee stores and all that sort of thing. So in one way I felt fairly comfortable there, but it does have a reputation for gangsterism, and it does, there has been a problem with law and order there for a long time, and corruption and all that. And I must say that on occasions I was a little alarmed. It was a Sunday morning and I just walked round our local neighbourhood, quite a smart neighbourhood, and I've never seen so many security men and dogs prowling around houses and all that sort of stuff. So clearly there's a feeling of sort of paranoia there. And then we did deliberately target the really hard drug-taking area, Calle Cartouche, the Bullet Street, with a journalist, I think, from The Guardian, who'd been there a long, long time, because we just wanted to see what that was like. We'd not seen anywhere like this, nor had we been able to find someone who would interpret it for us. And he'd lived in Colombia for a long, long time, knew and liked the Colombians very much, so he showed us this area. And that was one of the few places where we've had things thrown at the car. We had rocks thrown at the car, and at one point there was a gunshot heard, so we got out of there fairly quickly. And then on the last day we went to interview Don Fabio, who I think he was the father of two of the biggest sort of gang leaders and drug barons in Colombia, and had they had a fearsome reputation. He was Mr. Clean, apparently never ever been anything associated with him other than two of his children had been in prison for quite long periods. However, there was a definite feeling when you go along there that this is, he is the godfather, just the sort of figure, rather striking figure. And basically we were just really filming this restaurant of his, which was in a sort of dedicated to the equestrian arts. So the horses everywhere, and sort of waiters would come up to your tables. Well, wouldn't actually serve you from a horse, but they'd nearly get knocked over by horses as they go by. So you'd eat your meal while horses were going along, and then people are clearing up the droppings. So it was a curious place to be, and suddenly someone said, Don Fabio has agreed to be interviewed. So I was suddenly thrust in there. What on earth do we ask him? And I was given a sort of few phrases in Spanish to ask him. And there he was, the great, this great figure, this man, extraordinary, sort of powerful, notorious character in Colombia. And there I was, bleating out my questions about whatever we asked him. Anyway, it turned out to be quite charming. And then halfway through, suddenly said, "Would you like to see me ride my horse?" And so people don't often say that in the middle of the interview. "Should I be to get on a horse?" "Well, actually, just stay sitting there, really." But no, so he said yes, and this has obviously been planned. And the horse was there. Unfortunately, it was very sad because he was a big man and he obviously wasn't terribly well, and he couldn't get on the horse unaided. So about 20 of his henchmen rush around and hoist him onto the horse. And here was this great sort of godfather being lifted on, and then he goes slightly the other side. Someone steadies him, pushes him back, and I thought, this is just so embarrassing, really, that someone should be reduced to this. He must be in his 70s or something like that. And then suddenly when he was on the horse, everything was fine, and he was absolutely in control, and he just sort of galloped off, and that was that. The home and away sequence, which was shot in Sydney, and well, pleasure to shoot that was. That was a really lovely day's filming. There was such a nice cast, and obviously I thought it was a great laugh to have somebody like me around coming into their programme. They'd written a part especially for me with the surfboard. It was indeed transmitted, and it turned out to be unexpectedly good for my reputation, because my daughter at that time was at Oxford University, and evidently Home and Away was cult viewing there. I mean, forget sort of Panorama, forget all the sort of serious sort of arts programmes or whatever they should have been watching. It was Home and Away was the big cult programme for Oxford undergraduates then. And so the fact that I was actually in it, playing for a sort of a packed house in the college bar, really, so I think added to my reputation. Said, that wasn't embarrassing, Dad. And that's quite rare for my daughter to say it wasn't embarrassing, since most of my career is embarrassing. There seems to be something that goes wrong for us at the end of journeys. It happened on Around the World in 80 Days, when we got back to London feeling triumphant. You know, within 17 hours of the 80-day limit, we got back, and nobody would speak to us, and people shouted at us, and everyone was generally very disagreeable. And finally, the Reform Club, where we'd started, wouldn't even let us back in again, because they had some function on that day. And then Pole to Pole nearly got to the end. The great climax was going to be the ship across the Southern Oceans. Suddenly the ship didn't have any places, so something seemed to go wrong as we got towards the end. And I sort of felt this. I felt that as we made our way up the coast of America in the last programme, everything seemed to be going very smoothly, be very easy. I mean, you were in Canada where everything works and the train takes along and all that. And the last part of the journey seemed, to be as easy as it possibly could be. We were going to be taken on an American Coast Guard cutter to the island of Diomede, not just in a rowing boat, not in a walrus boat like we'd set out on or anything like that, but this was a 12,000-ton, fully equipped American Coast Guard cutter. And then the weather came down, and even this ship couldn't get close. And we had been doing a bit of filming on the coast and got cut off. The weather came down very, very quickly. As people did say, in the Bering Strait, it does. Weather can change very, very quickly, and it did. And we were marooned for a while on the mainland near a place called Wales. And the helicopter from this Coast Guard cutter came and picked us up. And that, I think, was one of the most alarming things that I've ever known on any of the journeys, was when this helicopter then had to land back on the cutter, and the boat was by that time pitching and tossing. An incredible skill of the helicopter pilot to hold it in there and land it on this sort of circular disc about 50 feet across, something like that. Whew. So that was one thing we got down there. And then the captain said he'd looked at all his sort of radar and his weather pictures and all that and his GPS, and said, the weather's getting worse, I just can't get you onto Diomede. And I remembered really from the first time we'd been there how sheer those cliff walls are. I mean, Diomede rises like a peak of a mountain out of the middle of the Bering Strait, so there's not a flat beach or anything like that. But somehow I felt, well, that's the way it is. That's traditional for our programmes. But the end doesn't quite. Something goes wrong at the end. But touch wood, we'd been very, very fortunate at the beginning and the middle. So something goes wrong at the end. I suppose that's that's fair enough. We had most of the series there, and added to that, I think it gave an extra sense of sort of drama to the ending, and showed just how dangerous and difficult the Bering Strait is. When we first went there at the opening, it was mill pond calm. That happens very rarely. So in the end, what we experienced on this Coast Guard cutter that prevented us from completing the full circle